everyone, welcome back. We're going deep today into the world of keto and more specifically those frustrating weight loss plateaus that can happen. You know, you're doing everything right, sticking to the diet, but the scale just won't budge. So we're going to figure out why that might be. Yeah, keto's definitely become super popular for weight loss, but there's often this kind of misconception that it's a guaranteed quick fix. And it's really not.
Right. It's not magic. It's more like one of the sources compared it to flipping a switch.
Yeah, like a metabolic switch.
Hmm.
Your body has to make this shift to start burning fat efficiently.
But how do you know if the switch is actually flipped? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's where the science comes in. Ketosis is a metabolic state where your body actually starts using ketones, which are derived from fat as its primary fuel source. So instead of running on carbs, we're running on fat.
Okay, so that's the goal, right? To get into ketosis.
Exactly. That's the whole point of the keto diet.
Yeah.
It's what can lead to that rapid weight loss people talk about.
But just because you're following a keto diet doesn't necessarily mean you're actually in ketosis.
Right. Just because you're cutting carbs doesn't mean you flip that switch.
So how do we know? How can we check if we're really in ketosis?
Well, there are a couple ways you can actually monitor your ketone levels. One common and pretty affordable option is using urine test strips.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
They basically react with the ketones in your urine and give you like a visual indication of whether or not you're in ketosis.
Okay, so that's one way. Another method I saw mentioned was using a breathalyzer.
Yeah, those measure the amount of acetone on your breath. Acetone is actually a byproduct of ketone production.
Wow. So it's like having your own little science experiment?
Exactly.
But here's the thing that really surprised me. Even if you are in ketosis, you still need to be mindful of your calorie intake.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
That's a fundamental principle of weight loss, no matter what diet you're following. To lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit.
Meaning you're consuming fewer calories than your body is burning.
All right? And keto doesn't change that. It's not a free pass to eat as much as you want.
The source actually even linked to a calorie calculator. I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah, those can be super useful. You just plug in your information and get a personalized estimate of how many calories you need each day.
Exactly. So you can actually make informed choices about what you're eating.
It puts you in control.
Okay, so we've confirmed we're in ketosis, we're tracking our calories. What's next?
Well, actually, sticking to the keto plan, that sounds simple, but it's where a lot of people struggle.
Right. It's not just about bacon cheeseburgers all day long.
No. It's about eating the right kinds of fats and staying within those specific macronutrient ratios.
The source specifically mentioned 70 to 75% of your calories from fat, 20 to 25% from protein, and keeping those carbs super low, like around 20 to 50 grams per day.
Yeah, and that's where it can get tricky. Carbs are sneaky, they're everywhere, and even small slip-ups can kick you out of ketosis.
Like if you have a handful of chips or a sugary drink, it all adds up.
Exactly. And you know what the source talked about? How a lot of people actually struggle with carb cravings without even realizing it.
Almost like we're conditioned to crave them. They're in so many of the foods we grew up with.
It's true. And breaking free for those cravings can be a real challenge when you're trying to stick with keto.
So how do we do it? How do we break free and stay on track?
Well, one thing that's often recommended is finding keto-friendly alternatives for those carb-heavy foods you love. Like instead of pasta, you could try zucchini noodles or cauliflower rice.
Ooh, I've heard those are good. And what about bread? I love bread.
You can actually use almond flour to make keto-friendly bread and other baked goods.
Wow. So there are options. It's not about deprivation.
Right. It's about finding creative ways to enjoy the foods you love while still sticking to your goals.
But it's not just about the food itself, right? Our sources also talked about the importance of addressing the mental and emotional aspects of keto.
Absolutely. It's a huge mindset shift.
Yeah.
You're basically rewiring your brain to think about food in a whole new way.
And that can be really tough.
Yeah, it can be challenging. So it's important to find ways to support yourself mentally and emotionally during this transition.
Like what kind of things?
One thing the source emphasized was finding your why. Like, what's your motivation for doing keto? Is it weight loss, improved energy, better mental clarity? Whatever it is, remind yourself of that reason regularly, especially when those cravings hit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Having a strong why can help you stay focused and motivated.
Exactly. It's like your anchor.
But what about those times when you're doing everything right? You're in ketosis, you're hitting your macros, but you still hit a plateau, like your weight loss just stalls.
That's a really common problem.
Yeah.
And it can be super frustrating.
Our sources actually suggested that our hormones might be playing a role here.
You're right. Sometimes it's not just about what you're eating, but about what's going on inside your body.
Like with our hormones.
Exactly. And one hormone in particular that's often linked to weight loss plateaus is leptin.
Leptin. Okay, I've heard of that, but remind me what it does again.
So leptin is a hormone that's produced by your fat cells. And it basically plays a crucial role in regulating your appetite and your metabolism. Think of it like your body's internal fuel gauge.
It tells your brain how much energy you have stored and whether you need to eat more or less.
Exactly.
So if leptin is working properly, it should help us maintain a healthy weight.
Right. But the problem is that sometimes leptin doesn't work the way it should.
What do you mean?
Well, over time, especially with prolonged exposure to a high-calorie diet, our bodies can actually become resistant to leptin signals.
So even though our fat cells are producing leptin, our brain isn't getting the message.
Exactly. It's like the signal is getting lost somewhere along the way.
And when that happens, what are the consequences?
Well, when your brain doesn't get that "we're full" signal from leptin, you continue to feel hungry, even if you've already eaten enough.
Oh, wow. So you end up overeating even if you don't need to.
Right. And that can make weight loss incredibly challenging, even on keto.
So how does this all tie back into the weight loss plateau?
Well, if you're following keto diligently and you're still not seeing the results you want, it's possible that leptin resistance is a factor. Your body might be holding on to fat, even though you're in a calorie deficit, because your brain isn't getting those right signals.
So what can we do about it? How do we address leptin resistance and get our bodies back on track?
That's a great question. And thankfully, our sources had some really interesting insights on that,
Right.
which we'll dive into right after this break. So we were talking about leptin resistance and how it can really stall your progress on keto. But the good news is there are things you can do to improve your leptin sensitivity.
Okay, so how do we get those signals flowing smoothly again?
Well, one of the most effective strategies is focusing on getting enough sleep.
Sleep. Really? I mean, I know it's important for overall health, but how does it impact leptin?
Well, studies have shown that when you're sleep deprived, your body actually produces less leptin and more ghrelin, which is another hormone that stimulates appetite.
Ah, so it's like your body's saying, hey, I'm tired, let's eat.
Exactly. And that can make it so hard to maintain a calorie deficit. You're constantly fighting against those hunger signals.
So lack of sleep is basically messing with our hormones, making us feel hungrier even when we don't need to be.
Right. And the source recommended aiming for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night.
Wow, that's a lot of sleep. But I guess it's worth it if it helps with leptin.
It really is. What else can we do to improve leptin sensitivity?
What else did the sources say?
Another big factor is managing stress.
Stress. Okay, I can see how that might play a role.
When we're stressed out, our bodies release cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right. Cortisol is important,
Mm,
but too much of it can be a problem.
exactly. And chronically high levels of cortisol can actually interfere with leptin signaling.
So it's like your body is in constant fight or flight mode,
Hmm.
and it's not paying attention to leptin's messages.
Right. The source suggested things like mindfulness practices, meditation, spending time in nature, engaging in activities you enjoy. All those things can help manage stress.
That makes sense. It's about taking care of ourselves both mentally and physically.
Absolutely. What about exercise? I know that's important for overall health, but does it have any impact on leptin?
Good question. I'm curious too.
It does. Regular exercise can actually improve your leptin sensitivity.
So it's like giving your body a workout and
Yeah.
saying, hey, we need to be more efficient with our energy use.
Exactly. And the source recommended aiming for at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, most days of the week.
Okay, that's doable. But what about the food itself? Are there certain foods that can help or hinder leptin sensitivity?
There are. And one of the biggest things the source emphasized was avoiding processed foods, sugary drinks, refined carbs, all that stuff.
Yeah, those are the usual suspects.
Right. Those types of foods can contribute to inflammation and insulin resistance, which can make leptin resistance even worse.
So sticking to whole unprocessed foods is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there are certain foods that can actually support leptin sensitivity.
Oh, like what?
The source specifically mentioned omega-3 fatty acids.
Ah, the good.
Exactly. They have anti-inflammatory properties that can help improve leptin signaling. You can find them in fatty fish, walnuts, flax seeds, things like that.
Okay, so we've got sleep, stress management, exercise, a healthy diet. Anything else we should be thinking about in terms of leptin?
Well, the source also touched on intermittent fasting as a potential strategy for improving leptin sensitivity.
Oh, yeah, intermittent fasting. I've heard a lot about that lately.
It's become really popular,
Yeah.
and for good reason. Research suggests that it can help regulate leptin levels and improve insulin sensitivity.
So it's not just what we eat, but when we eat.
Exactly. There are lots of different approaches to intermittent fasting, so it's important to find what works best for you and your lifestyle.
It sounds like there are so many factors that can impact leptin sensitivity.
It's a complex system, for sure. But by addressing those key areas we talked about, you can create a supportive environment for your body to function at its best.
And hopefully break through those weight loss plateaus.
Exactly. And remember, it's all about making sustainable lifestyle changes that support your overall health and well-being.
This has been so helpful. I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about tackling those plateaus. Now, speaking of the mental and emotional aspects of keto, that's something our sources touched on as well. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We talked about the science of keto, the importance of being in ketosis and managing those macros, and the role of hormones like leptin. But our sources also highlighted something really important, the mental and emotional side of keto.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the food and the numbers. But keto is a lifestyle change, and that comes with its own unique challenges.
It's not just about willpower.
Right, exactly. A lot of people think it's just about white-knuckling your way through those cravings and resisting temptation. But it's more complex than that.
Our sources actually talked about carb addiction, that it's not just about being weak or lacking discipline.
Right. Carbs, especially refined carbs, they can trigger the release of dopamine in our brains.
Dopamine, that's the feel-good chemical.
Exactly. And it creates this reward cycle that can be really hard to break. So it's not just a psychological thing, it's physiological too.
Wow, so we're battling both our minds and our bodies.
In a way, yes. And that's why just trying to ignore cravings or power through them often doesn't work.
It's like holding your breath underwater. Eventually, you have to come up for air.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative? How do we work with our cravings instead of against them?
That's the million-dollar question.
One strategy the sources talked about is finding healthy substitutes for your favorite carb-heavy foods. Like, there are tons of creative keto-friendly recipes out there that can satisfy those cravings without throwing you off track.
Oh, yeah. I've seen some amazing keto dessert recipes. They look incredible. You can still enjoy those sweet treats just with a keto twist.
Exactly. And another tip they mentioned is focusing on eating satisfying meals that keep you feeling full and energized. When your body is properly nourished, you're less likely to crave those quick hits of energy from carbs.
Makes sense. It's about fueling our bodies with good stuff.
Right. And beyond the food itself, our sources also emphasize the importance of mindset and motivation.
Yeah, it's not just about what we're eating, but how we're thinking and feeling about the whole journey.
Exactly. They talked about setting realistic goals, celebrating those small victories, finding a support system to help you stay accountable.
It's so easy to get overwhelmed if you're constantly comparing yourself to others or focusing only on that end goal. But if you break it down into smaller steps, it feels much more manageable.
And don't forget to celebrate those milestones along the way. It makes the journey more enjoyable.
Speaking of a healthy relationship with food, one of the sources brought up something I found really interesting, the concept of mindful eating. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Mindful eating is all about paying attention to the present moment experience of eating.
Like really slowing down and savoring each bite.
Exactly. Noticing the flavors, the textures, the aromas. It's about being fully present with your food.
Instead of just scarfing it down mindlessly.
Right. And when we eat mindfully, we're more likely to notice our body's cues of hunger and fullness, which can help prevent overeating.
It also helps us appreciate our food more.
Absolutely. And I think it ties in nicely with another point our sources made about addressing emotional eating.
Oh yeah, emotional eating. That's a big one.
We've all been there. Right. We turn to food for comfort when we're stressed or sad or bored.
It's like emotional eating 101.
And the key is to become aware of those emotional triggers and find healthier ways to cope with them.
Instead of reaching for that bag of chips when you're feeling down, maybe go for a walk or call a friend or do something you enjoy.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to nourish yourself emotionally without using food as a crutch.
This whole deep dive has really highlighted the importance of a holistic approach to keto.
Yeah.
It's not just about the food, it's about our mindset, our emotions, our sleep. It's about taking care of ourselves on every level.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that all these aspects are interconnected. They all play a role in our overall health and well-being.
And I think one of the most valuable takeaways from this entire conversation is that keto is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. It's about experimenting, learning, and finding what works best for you as an individual.
And being patient with yourself along the way. There will be ups and downs, challenges and triumphs.
Absolutely. But by staying informed, staying motivated, and staying connected to your why, you can overcome those obstacles and achieve your goals.
Well, there you have it, folks. our deep dive into the world of keto. We've covered a lot of ground, but hopefully you're leaving this conversation feeling empowered to take charge of your own keto journey.
Remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn, more to explore, more to discover.
So keep learning, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. You got this.
Until next time.